All right, today I'm working on my favorite leaf blower that I've ever used or worked on. This is the one I owned for 8 or 9 years. I've worked on Echoes, Steels, Husqvarnas, and all the cheaper brands. I think this one is really well made. Um, you can lift this up and you can add a vacuum attachment for sucking up leaves. The outlet comes out the center of the machine, so it doesn't want to push to the left or the right. And it has this trigger lock, so you don't have to squeeze the trigger the whole time. It's always started reliably. This belongs to a customer, but it has a failure that is kind of common, not to this machine, but to machines in general. I thought I would show it. But in general, one of my favorite, probably my favorite backpack blower. Anyway, he brought it to me, said it wouldn't start, and he said this fell out of the gas tank. And he kind of thought that the fuel had gone bad, which it often does. And so we're going to take a look at the carburetor, and we're going to take a look at the fuel lines in the fuel tank. So we'll get started on that. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, stick around. If not, split. 8mm, couple of little nuts. Once those nuts are off, you can get this little guy out. And there's a purge bulb in there. I'll just leave that to the side for the moment. So this one is a little bit annoying to work on. This is not, I would say this is not the most serviceable of all the leaf blowers that I've worked on. I just like owning it and using it. But to get the get the carb out, you do really have to take this side panel off. So let me grab the Allens really quick. I'm also not a big fan when manufacturers use Allens. I like Torx quite a bit more, but that's okay. I think that in general, the most serviceable brand, easy to work on, is Echo. They're Japanese versus this is Swedish, and Steel is German. I worked for a German manufacturer, Volkswagen, for 16 years. They are not easy to work on. They do not pride themselves in serviceability, but the Japanese do. And here we have some Torxes. T20. Interesting note, you can always use a T20 for a T25 and a T25 for a T27. Although there's a small risk of stripping it, but most of the time you don't, unless it's really in there good. So working on a leaf blower is not very different than working on something like a weed eater. The packaging is just often a little bit different and tighter. Like normally you wouldn't have to do that on a weed whacker. But I've tried to get these carburetors out before without doing that, and it's just a real pain. And I'm not even sure it's possible anymore, to be honest. I think in every case I gave up and pulled it off, because if not, you're very likely going to bend this lever. So pull that off. I like to try and keep one side attached so you always remember which side's which. It's easy to think I'll never forget, but I often do. And then we'll pull the carb off. Okay, and I'll get a better view here for everybody. My best friend is convinced that people like these kinds of videos, these long format ones where you just don't do any editing and you just go kind of step by step. I'm not totally convinced, but I think that's because I don't really like watching these kinds of videos. But that's okay. So to get fuel lines off, you never want to pull them. It's kind of like Chinese finger cuffs or that finger game. You always got to push them off. And I'm going to be replacing these, so I don't really even have to be that delicate with them. But it's a good practice to learn to be delicate. So there's the carb. So we'll just take a quick look inside the carb first, see if anything has gone wrong in there. Yes, things have gone wrong in there. So you see the debris here. That is not good. Lots of debris. And then you can see debris in the screen, which is not good. It got caught on the screen, which is great. That's the purpose of the screen, but it's not good that it was in there. The other thing you want to look for, so this is called the fuel pump side. That's actually a fuel pump. It's pretty amazing. This is the metering diaphragm side. And what very often happens is that these metering diaphragms get stiff and hard. And this one's okay. When they're really bad, you can hear them click and clack. This one you can hear a little bit. I'll put it by the microphone. But it's not too bad. I'll replace it anyway because I have it. And you can also remove these screws, which I'll do. Let me just grab the screwdriver for that. What I like to do, I always like to hold the carburetor in the same orientation whenever I work on them. That means screws as up as possible. So not like this, this, or this, but so. Always to the pointing to the right. And I take my screwdriver, and before you loosen them, you need to tighten them because you need to find out how screwed in they are and they aren't. So I start with the emblem at the top and I lightly turn. You don't want to really ream on them because you can damage the aluminum seat that the valve pushes against. So that was one turn. And you can write these down. It's a good idea. Most of the time I can remember them if I'm not in a rush and I'm not too forgetful. Of course, in this case, I have the video, so I can always do that. So one's about 1 3/4. So 1 3/4 and 1. Normally they're between 1 and 2. It can vary a little bit from machine to machine, but I'm gonna tune the carburetor anyway, so it's not super critical, but it gives me a good baseline, so I don't waste a bunch of time, trying to find the tune that is gonna work. All right, so this thing does not need much scrubbing, so I'm just gonna do just a little bit of carb clean. There's some debate on using carb clean, specifically in these holes, so you wanna be cautious and not shove the straw in there and squeeze with all your might, because there are check valves, namely right there, and those check valves are not very robust. They're basically just a floating piece of like fabric, or well, something that feels like fabric anyway. So you want to be real careful that you don't dislodge those, which you can do. Ironically, the manufacturers of these carburetors, Zama and Walboro, they actually show in some of their instructional videos to use carb clean just like I showed. But there's a lot of experienced technicians out there who will say, be very careful with that. And I agree with them on that. So now we'll go, I basically put it all the way in lightly. Now we're going to go the 1 1/2. Again, you don't have to go right back to where you were if you plan on tuning it, but getting it real close is nice because you won't, if you're super rich or super lean, you can't even get the machine started. And if you can't even get it started, then you can't tune it. And so I do like to return them as close as possible to what they were at. Okay. Normally I'll have like a little dish of fuel and I'll soak and scrub everything, but this is really, the type of debris in here is just like a bit of debris that probably because the fuel filter fell off. Some debris got in there, but it doesn't really require a lot of scrubbing and things like that. It's not like lots of varnish and sort of thick corrosion or anything like that. So it's a pretty light duty cleaning application in this case. So I'm just gonna take it while I have it, the light duty cleaning. Also speeds up the video a little bit. Most of the time you don't have to worry about keeping these screws sorted because they are not interchangeable, not even close. But pay attention if you want. I like to snug them with the gun because I've done it 1,000 times and then finish them off. I would say if you've not done this 1,000 times, and you probably haven't if you're watching this video, then don't use the gun and just use a screwdriver. All right, I'm going to grab a diaphragm. It's really nice to keep these 4 common diaphragms in stock because you'll use them a lot. And again, a new one is like real nice fabric. This one is not bad. I probably don't even need to replace this, but I will because it barely costs anything and it's a nice thing to do for the customer. Just did one final little spray off camera. The gasket always goes first. Always, always, always the gasket goes first. And then goes the metering diaphragm. If you get that wrong, you'll have all kinds of problems because the distance from the metering diaphragm to the needle, which I'm not going to go over in this video, I've gone over it in many others, that distance matters. In fact, you have to adjust it sometimes. So So rebuilding a carburetor can go really fast, especially when you know what you're doing, when you pay attention. It can go a little slower. And one of the main mistakes people make, myself included, I think it's a type of arrogance where you basically just say, oh, I'll remember how that goes back together. How could I possibly forget? And then you do. And then you spend more time trying to figure out how it went back together than even putting it back together. And that's always pretty embarrassing, I think. At least it is for my ego. So carburetor's done for now. Put that aside. Now we're going to get into the fuel tank. So if a fuel filter falls off, it's a pretty good sign that the fuel lines are rotted. There's two little ears on this thing, so if you squeeze one or both, you can get that off. And on a setup like this, we can pry. One of the best tools you'll ever find. If you don't own one of these, check it out on Amazon. I made a video about that. I think it's called The Tool You Didn't Know You Needed, something like that. It's one of my most popular. I'll let you find it. Sherlock Holmes. And yeah, so we'll pry out this gasket assembly, or this not gasket, what's the word? I'm blanking on what we call these. Grommets. It's a type of grommet. Maybe we'll get lucky and be able to pull on this little guy. Most of the time they pull off. Yes, that's what I figured they would do. Okay, we're just gonna pull these up. Disaster strikes the camera, but we're still filming. Not bad. So if you pull these fuel lines out, it's a little bit easier to pull this out. Okay, there we go. Now you don't have to remove this. Sure, buddy. But you can, and I did. You can just push the lines through, but it's a little bit easier to do it the other way. You want to get any old fuel lines out of the tank, and you can see, yeah, you can see the problem. So fuel lines were definitely bad, obviously. And there's a couple of these little guys involved, these little male-to-male couplers. You can do without them, but I normally restore things to OEM condition, so we'll use them. I'm pretty sure their purpose is to aid in the production process so that they can kind of plug and play just a little bit quicker. And if you do use fuel line, I recommend buying Tygon. I've used the non-Tygon stuff for a long time, but I had a couple of them come back, and the Tygon stuff, it's not that hard to find typically. I mean, you can find it on the internet, on Amazon, not always, but often. And you can, I get mine sometimes at just Ace Hardware. There's only a couple sizes that you'll generally need. This is one of them. And putting fuel lines into fuel tanks or grommets can be tricky when you don't have easy access to both sides. In this case, I do, so it's really easy. But if you don't, I'll just show you. If you don't have access to both sides, what I do, I will cut this like that, but I'll do it even more. I'm not going to do it just because it wastes a little bit. And I will, when it's thin like this, you can get a portion of it easily through the grommet because there's no friction fit because you've cut it away. So you do it like that, and then you can reach into the fuel tank with pliers and pull on that and pull it through. Obviously, when you have access with both hands like this, piece of cake, that's a totally unnecessary step. But when you don't, it's a really nice step. So actually, I lied. I'm not going to use these. I don't need them. They don't help me at all. So I'm going to push on, sorry, I should do that on camera for you. Push on a fuel filter. And I don't know exactly what length I want to have this in. So I'm going to kind of test it out. You can, of course, just match the length that you had before, but too long is not good, too short is not good. Happy medium, imagine that. A lot of things in life are that way. And I'm just going to leave this line there for now. I don't like to waste things, so I will just run the other end of this fuel line through here. And again, easy to grab, although that's not always the case. And this is my return line, so it's just real short like that. And then I'm going to just take a little bit of Vaseline. Vaseline is my choice of lubricant when it comes to fuel lines and grommets. It's petroleum based, so I've never had a bad reaction with the gas, and it's never plugged anything up. So, okay. This is a potential source for future problems. You can have leaks if you don't get this grommet just right. So you want to just check it, make sure you haven't pinched it or anything like that. And yeah, basically you'll have one line coming out that goes right to the carb. Then you'll have a line that goes from the carb to the purge bulb, and then the purge bulb dumps back into the tank. So now we'll figure out exactly how far we want those things to be. So this is going to go here, like this. Am I doing? Am I on camera? Look at that. Amazing. What's going on here? There we go. It's kind of weird. Hey, baby. Love you more? Okay. So make sure you know which one is which. And I forgot which one is which. Imagine that. So let me just. Okay, there we go. This is the fuel feed. So the fuel feed is going to loop around like this and go there. Oh, cool, buddy. I'm making a video right now. Yeah, that's okay. All right. Sorry, we got distracted. So let me pull this back off to show you. So there's two fuel lines. This one is the inlet to the fuel pump, and I know that because I've worked on a bunch of these. You'll want to pay a little bit better attention. This is the outlet. So started paying attention to my lovely kids. Got distracted. That'll happen. No shame. Not for me anyway. So this guy is now quite a bit longer than he needs to be, so I'll trim him again. And I will gently push him on. You can use a little bit of Vaseline here if you want. I tend not to, just because this is not a connection where the Vaseline will be washed away. But there's been once or twice when I've had to. These are really great pliers from Knipex. They are a little needle nose, but they're totally flat, so they don't serrate and destroy things like something like this too. And these are from this nice Japanese company, TTC, I guess. And they have these plastic jaws that are replaceable. That's even better when you're dealing with plasticky stuff. Okay, so we will throw the trigger back on. Like this. It's always funny how these things, sorry. Let's see here. There we go. Popped off when I was moving something. So you want to just check it, make sure that's going to work for you, and it does. Okay, and then before we put the last housing on, we'll just get this situation figured out. So on a purge bulb, there's always a long and a short. The long is out. You can remember that however you want. I just remember it over time. It's worked for me. So this is going to go here because it goes back into the tank. And then we just need a short piece, although this is probably too short. That is going to go go figure. I'll just take this back off since it's in my way. Sorry, I know my hands are in the way. By the way, if you're ever watching someone do this kind of thing on YouTube and you kind of think this guy seems like an idiot, sometimes it's because we're used to just working and not being watched, not trying to talk at the same time, and also not trying to keep our hands in or out of the way for the camera shots. So that thing kind of happens, and it can kind of throw you for a loop as you get used to doing all of that. Anyway, give some folks some grace, especially me. We'd all appreciate it. All right, so I'm just going to pop this purge bulb back into its home. I may shorten the lines just a little bit more if I think that's helpful to the situation, but I don't know yet. And then this line is also going to go to the purge bulb. So I think at this point it's best to throw the cover back on. Make sure your trigger's working, otherwise you're going to regret that. And slide this guy back on carefully. It's a good idea to make sure everything's working. I can tell right now something is odd. Maybe. Seems like it. Ah, okay. The choke was on, so it changed the way that the trigger felt. Those are the kind of things you want to investigate before you put it back together. Unless you're up for an adventure. Then you get to do it twice if you want. How you doing, buddy? I had a nice little Allen this size that fit into my impact, but it broke. It was a balled Allen. That means there's a little ball at the end, so you don't have to be straight on. You can be in on an angle, but it's also a weak point in the whole system, and so it busted off, and I haven't replaced it. And so when I need a 4mm Allen, I find myself going old school with the wrenches. Okay, when you throw one of these on, it's important to give it a jiggle. Sometimes you can fasten it down and everything's bound up. It's always good to set some of this, all of the screws a little bit before you do any of them all the way. Otherwise you can get into a bind, literally and figuratively. Okay. And now the last thing to do is reattach this guy. Let's see, like so. But we're going to trim these lines so that they're not unnecessarily long. And right now they are quite a bit longer than they need to be. So I'll pop this guy back off. So once he's in there, oh, I knew something felt wrong. I just hadn't put my finger on it yet. Just feeling like an idiot in the process. One of my favorite things. Okay, there we go. So he's going to sit about right there. Pop this gasket back on before I forget. Okay, so then this one can be about this long. And that's my return. And then this one will be about the same. That's my outlet of the carburetor. I'll do that one first because he's a little harder to reach. When it comes to fuel lines, you got to be careful you don't get them kinked. So longer is not always better. You want to give yourself ample room to work, but not so much room. Do you have trouble? Okay. Because pinched fuel lines is definitely a thing. Oh gosh, I did that wrong too. Classic example of working and not losing my focus because I'm filming. Or the critics in the crowd can say, you just suck at it. It's fine, doesn't bother me. I'll say that if you like. Oh my goodness, I did it again. Embarrassing. I hate when I do that, when I literally make the same mistake twice. Okay. Now we're going to get it. There we go. Oh my goodness, finally. Okay. Kind of been a while since I've done one of these videos and a little bit off my game, I guess. Okay. So there we go. This is a great tool, by the way. Goes into any hex driver, and it's an 8mm. So nice because it's all one piece. So after you've fastened something down and you're pulling it out of the engine compartment or whatever, it can't fall to pieces and leave something behind, which happens a lot when you have a bunch of extensions stacked up and everything. Okay. And I'm going to reach through. It's going to be hard to show you, but I'm going to reach through and just wiggle my fuel lines and make sure they're not pinched. You look in there with a flashlight. The packaging in leaf blowers is a little tighter than the packaging in weed eaters. Although normally not as bad as the packaging of chainsaws. So it kind of felt like I'd pinched. I don't think like totally pinched, but a partial pinch. So I'm just going to double check that because that's not a problem I want to have. And I'm going to take a little bit extra care to reach in there with a screwdriver. There we go. I like that better. I'm not sure that I was pinched, but I might have been, and kinds of things are just worth double checking. In case you're wondering, I try not to edit out my mistakes or my shortcomings because if you're watching this, then you're probably trying to do this yourself, and you're probably not like me who's done it 200 times. And so any mistake I make is probably a mistake you might make. And so I don't want to hide that from you because it might be really helpful for you to see the mistakes I make because you might be making the same. I'm also not interested in pretending as if I'm like all that and perfect and never make mistakes. So in case you're wondering, like, why doesn't this guy take the time to edit out his issues? It's a gift to you. Also saves me time. All right, I'm just going to put some gas in this thing. I hate this gas can. I've purchased from estate sales those super old school ones that don't have all these anti-spill features, which to me seem to always increase the likelihood of spilling. So first thing you'll want to do is hit the purge bulb a couple times. The whole system's dry, so it'll take more than normal. And if it starts to build up like that, that's a very good sign. All right. So now we'll see if it starts, and then it'll be noisy, but we'll do the tuning. So it's already on, it's already purged. We will choke it. Good sign. Take the choke to partial choke. All right. We'll do partial choke again. All right, we're going to take it outside, do the tuning now, because those probably need to be tuned, which is why it's not starting easily. Okay, so the machine's totally hot. We're going to start by doing the idle adjustment. You can always know which one is the idle because it's the one closest to the machine or the engine and furthest from the air filter. Conversely, the wide open throttle screw is always the one closest to the air filter. And if you're wondering why that is, it's because when the throttle plate is closed, there's only one little jet which is exposed to the engine side of the throttle plate. And so when you move the screw closest to the engine, furthest from the air filter, you're adjusting how much fuel goes up to that little hole. And since that hole has to be on the engine side of the throttle plate, it's always the screw closest to the engine. So the way we're going to do the idle is we're going to start the machine, and I'm going to do something like a quarter, maybe a half turn in each direction, and listen for when the RPM sounds highest. You can use a tachometer if you want. I own one of those, but you can actually do a really good job just with your ear. You'd be surprised. And then the confirmation after that is that basically as soon as you hit the throttle, it should start to throttle up. There shouldn't be a delay or bogging or lagging or anything like that. If there is, you're probably going to need to richen it up. That means lefty loosey, lefty richen. And you can remember that because it's kind of like when you go to your garden hose, as you loosen the spigot, more water comes out. In this case, when we loosen this, we let more fuel in. So more fuel means more rich. So I'll just film it. I don't know how well it'll be on the camera, but we'll try it, and maybe it'll be helpful for you. So first things, we'll get it started, then we'll tune it, and then we'll make sure it's working. All right, I'm also just going to rev it up, get it started, and we'll come back down to idle. Ah! Well, that's weird. It wasn't doing that a few minutes ago. I wonder what that's about. That's odd. All right, I'm going to open the wide open throttle screw. Nope, too lean. All right, I'm gonna adjust the idle up a little bit with a Phillips screwdriver. It could be that the customer messed with that. Normally you don't have to, but if they've messed with it, then it's out of adjustment. So with a Phillips, you can change the idle, and you're not changing the mixture of the idle, you're just changing the RPM of the idle. You can imagine that as you tighten the Phillips, it's like pulling the trigger a little bit. You're basically choosing the end point when you let go of the trigger. And that sounded a little bit low to me, so we're going to try a slightly higher one. Nope, too lean. All right, I'm going to richen it by a quarter turn. Richen it by another quarter turn. Now it's starting to run more lower, so I came back. You're basically going to find a sweet spot. You're going to go to the right too much, it's going to go down. Like that. You're going to go to the left too much, it's going to go down. Like that. You want to be right in the middle. And when you pull the trigger, it should respond immediately. Okay, so I'm not sure how well you'd be able to hear me, but basically, as you go to the left, you're going to richen it until it starts to run bad. Then you're going to go to the right and lean it out until it starts to run bad, and then you hit the sweet spot in between, and then you confirm that the moment you pull the trigger, the whole thing races up. Now, idle speed is a little bit flexible. Of course, there's a published specification. What you don't really want, like with a weed whacker, you don't want this head spinning. On a leaf blower, there's really no danger if it's running, but you don't want the thing like turning and walking all around the driveway from a high speed. So you can be a little higher than they recommend. It doesn't hurt anything so long as the thing's not vibrating going all over. Now, when we go wide open throttle to the wide open throttle screw, it's important that you have the tip on the blower because that changes the load. It's kind of like a truck driving down the road versus a truck driving down the road with a trailer. You need the trailer on the engine in order to get a proper tune. And what we're going to do is we're going to richen it until it begins to do something called force stroking. You'll be able to hear the RPMs almost sound like they double. They call that force stroking, where it's basically firing too often. And then we're going to lean it out until the force stroking goes away. So hopefully you'll be able to hear that. On other videos, people have been able to hear it, so hopefully it'll work here too. So hopefully you noticed and could hear that I was basically going on, off, on, off, on, off. As I went to the left and I richened it, you could hear it force stroking. Brrr, and then when I went just to the right, you could hear it going away again. So I'll do it one more time in case you didn't miss it, or in case you didn't catch it. And that's what force stroking is. And we want to be just a little bit leaner of the force stroking. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope that was helpful or interesting to someone who's working on their machine or maybe just interested. Um, and like I said, I'm aware that my videos lack a little bit of editing, but I'm doing that on purpose because when I watch videos by so-called experts, and it's something that I'm also very knowledgeable about, I can tell that they're editing things out. And on the one hand, I appreciate that because they're making the videos concise. But on the other hand, I don't appreciate that because they're misleading beginners into thinking that something is very easy and no mistakes can be made. And it's just as simple as one, two, three. And that's often not the case. Even I fixed around 500 or 600 small engines. And depending on the day and how I'm feeling, I still make a mistake and overlook something. And I just think it's a bit of a disservice to always make it look like we're doing something perfectly. So anyway, hope you liked this video. If you did, that's great. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Go check out Steve's Small Engine Saloon or The Repair Specialist or Donnie Boy, the Small Engine Doctor. Those guys are all pretty good, probably more interesting than me, and I hope you'll like their stuff. In the meantime, have a great day.